And good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt.
Hey, good morning. Listen, we've got a little bit of deviation from the normal political path today.
But this is a deviant show?
Not deviant, Jim. Where'd we get him at? Listen, we've got Jim Riley riding shotgun. I still don't know where deviation.
Oh, okay. Well,
deviation.
The derivation.
We were not talking about you. We were talking about a little bit of change in the normal
Do
pattern.
I got to grab the Webster or what?
I don't know, but put your finger on the microphone just in case we got to cut him off.
Throw some stakes on the Weber. Yeah.
Listen, in here with us today is Jim Riley, all riding shotgun. As you can tell, he's shooting in the wrong direction.
That's the truth.
We've got Brian Thomas, who's in control of the entire technical side of this show. And with us is Greg Stevens, who is a retail fraud and security professional. I say expert. He's been doing it for a very, very long time. And Greg Stevens, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I would like to take this opportunity to also congratulate you. I know recently you celebrated your 3rd anniversary on the show, so congratulations.
I did, and thank you very much. And today's kind of a different day. I got, you know how on Facebook you get those, and they seem to be going crazy with it lately, but I'll get those, a memory for you to reshare.
Exactly.
So on my way into to the station this morning, I get an update on my iPhone that says today is the 3rd anniversary of Jim Riley and I becoming Facebook friends.
Holy moly, now that's a celebratory event.
I'm telling
you,
it's a big deal now. That means 1 or 2 weeks from now, I can't remember anymore, but would have been the first time you sat in on the show right after that.
Could have been.
So that's 3 years. We got all
fun.
kinds of 3 years.
And time goes by very quickly. I would not have said 3 years.
No, I'm not 3 years. Time in general goes by.
Yes, it does.
I'm doing the deer hunting beard. That's kind of, and of course I'm 54, so I got the pot belly to go with the deer hunting beard. And a little kid, are you Santa Claus?
You're on your way.
Yeah.
Soon you'll move from beard to whiskers.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Listen, what I want to talk about today, folks, with Greg Stevens in the studio, is as we plunge into the biggest spending spree of the year on a retail basis for Christmas, not the holiday season, but for Christmas, as we go into that and everyone's spending dough, when we do that, we're putting ourselves out, I want to say in harm's way, but we're putting ourselves at risk. And I don't think that that's one of those bottomless pits. I think there are things that we can do to protect ourselves.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of just slowly delve into this, Greg, if we might. If I'm out tomorrow at the mall or at a big box store, I don't want to name any stores, but if I'm out shopping and I'm using my debit card all over, am I at risk of what should I be looking for?
Well, some of the things you should be looking for, certainly watch those who are paying attention to you. Let's say you're using your debit card. You're in line, certainly protect your PIN number as you're going through. And credit card, just watch who's paying attention to you, who might be walking behind you as you're conducting your transactions. There are people that will walk behind, they'll use their phones. Technology today, they could be recording video and they'll be able to take snapshots of the information off of your card or record your PIN number as you're putting it in. Okay. And especially with your checkbook. I know a lot of people don't use their checkbooks anymore, but we still see that.
Yep.
And they could be doing the same thing with the phone, where they record the information off the check and they can create copies and then
they're out kiting checks on you,
impacting your account. So most importantly, make sure you're keeping an eye on your accounts as well. We go through this busy season and all through the year, really. Because it's very rampant. And again, you talked about using your credit card. Another thing to really keep in mind, we've seen a lot in the news, are the skimmers on the gas pumps.
Yep, I was going to ask you about that.
Make sure that you're using pumps that are closest to the station or at least facing the station. Or go to a gas station you're familiar with and you know what their practices are in order to limit such abuses.
So closest to the station, facing the station, folks, as I interpret that, is to make sure that if I were going to try to install one of those machines, I'm probably going to pick a spot where the people inside the station can't see what
Correct.
I'm doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's not necessarily close to the station. It's close to the window where whoever it is looking out.
Those pumps will be the least likely to have been tagged.
Exactly.
Now, can they use that type of technology in a store? By the way,
as far as use which technology.
Well, let me give you an example of what I'm getting at, and maybe you can explain this. I'm a retailer. And
Right.
what that means, folks, is I just got done paying for some really outrageous machine that's designed to protect absolutely nothing as far as I can see. I resent it greatly. I really do. So
Right.
if there's any thieves listening, understand you may be helping yourself in the short run. I hope you go to jail, but you're causing everybody to spend a lot of needless money.
Exactly.
So I got this updated machine that's supposed to be a crystal or a chip or something?
Oh, the chip and pin?
The chip and
Yep,
pin. I just saw it
absolutely.
as more dough going out the door.
And it actually will help when everyone gets that in place and the cards, because you'll have to use those in conjunction. It'll be more difficult for them to use them in that manner.
Now, as I understand it, Europe's already
retail.
using these
Yes.
and have been for a while.
They've been very successful with that.
Have they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering
and that's
whether
why
there
the
was a-
technology is coming here and we're rushing to get it into place.
Makes me wonder why they're doing it. We're doing it last instead of first.
I agree.
Well, Europe has been ahead. I remember well over 20 years ago being in France, and the waiter came to our table with the bill on a little handheld credit card thing, and he took my card right there.
Card reader.
Yeah, this is 20 plus years ago.
Wow.
And gave us our bill right there. So there
No,
may
we
be
have a tendency-
regulatory reasons.
We have a tendency of perceiving ourselves, maybe wrongfully, as on the cutting edge of technology, when in truth, to both you gentlemen, we're a couple decades behind.
Well, and again, whether it's governmental, maybe it's easier to do certain things in France. We know
my guess
that,
is, by the way, societally, is that they've got a greater issue than we do.
Well, I will tell you, one of the single biggest reasons that Europe has had a much faster explosion in the use of cell phones is that they never had the kind of landlines that we had in the United States.
Right.
It was everyone in this country had a telephone. Certainly, the vast majority. In Europe, they didn't have that.
Yeah.
So
Party lines and baked telephones that you could beat somebody to death.
well, that
with.
was when
Wasn't
we
that
had
long
party
ago.
lines.
No, it
Europe
wasn't.
had no lines.
Yeah.
But I've got a question that constantly comes up, and again, the reason I bring the government side in because regulation not only it matters in these things, but it seems to change all the time. I know that at one point I had read that you never want to use a debit card, and then I read no, you never want to use a credit card. Is one safer than the other?
Well, I would say when you're making big purchases and you're out in the holiday season, I don't want to tell people what to do, but what I do personally is that we do use our credit card when we make big purchases or holiday purchases when we're out in the mall or something along those lines, because it does protect your money better. Because if your debit card is compromised, that's accessing your funds, your money, your cash
But
on
aren't
hand.
the banks required to
can.
protect you in some manner?
They can only do so much to protect you, and at some point,
If someone steals out of my account that way,
Exactly.
is the bank obligated to give me the dough back?
it can take a while. But yes,
So-
once they go through and conduct their investigation,
What-
or if you're on top of
So
that,
I might
and
get
you
my
cut
money
it
back
off,
after Christmas.
possibly.
Well, what is your limit? Okay, let's just maybe get specific here. If I'm using a credit card and
Yes.
someone is able to get my credit card and they take my identity and then they go out and spend $10,000, how much at risk am I?
You could be zero. Should be zero because you should be
In a
able to prove that
credit
it was
card.
and the credit card, and it doesn't impact your cash on hand. Where you can get a hold of the credit card company and work through their fraud investigation.
Well, there's no cash on hand in a credit card unless I
Right,
wanted to
exactly.
take it out.
And
Now,
that's
in a
where-
debit card,
That's why it's better to use a credit card versus the debit
okay.
card. in that
And what
situation.
happens to me in using a debit card? Same instance. Someone has gotten my maybe I lost my card. Somehow my card has been compromised. They go out and they spend $10,000. Let's just say I've got $20,000 in the bank.
Okay.
What happens to me then?
Well, then you have to go through and prove that it wasn't you, and then hopefully you will get your money back once the investigation has been conducted and
So
it's proved that
It's
it
gone
wasn't you.
until I am able to prove, and I might not be
Exactly.
able to
You
prove.
might not be able to.
Exactly.
I'll tell you
And that's
another
why
way of,
I use the credit card when we're doing
Right.
that instead of the
because
Okay.
the credit card is going to be guaranteed in a shorter period of time. You've got
Correct.
there's a contractual extension between you and the credit card company that is not necessarily. And by the way, I used to run dealerships for a living. I think a lot of folks know, and I've seen circumstances where the bank, for instance, I saw a major embezzlement at a Ford store on the other side of the state, where the bank had the policy, the contract between the dealer and the bank was a 2-signature check system. And the dealer had an employee that cashed several $1 million over the period of a couple years using only one signature. And inevitably, the dealer was able to get the bank to have to swallow a portion of the pill, not the whole pill, but it took several years and a huge amount of money in litigation fees. But in terms of the concept of the debit card, I got to tell you, I am not in favor of credit cards. I'm a Dave Ramsey guy.
Understand.
Having said that, with my debit cards, and I do have credit cards, by the way, but using my debit card probably exclusively, both for me personally and then also Renegade River, the corporation, has one also. But I keep a minimal amount in the checking accounts only for what I'm going to be doing for that day or that week, with the difference being in a savings that I can transfer electronically. And it gives me a little bit extra comfort. So they can only get what I'm willing to leave in that checking account. And whereas, for instance, in the company's got whatever it's got sitting in a savings. And when I know I'm getting ready to make an inventory order or whatever's going to require more than daily costs, same as on a personal basis, I transfer it in. And so I'm just exposed for that period of time before the purchases are completed. To me, that makes a lot more sense.
That does make a lot of sense.
Let me ask you this. I get probably 3 or 4 a week of these thick envelopes from my credit card companies, or even cards that I've had in years gone by and I still don't even use, that have those checks in them, so that I can write myself a loan if I want. Well, I have actually about the only thing I use for my shredder is these. But what happens? What happens if somebody gets hold of one of these blank checks, and let's just say it is a credit card that is still active? Am I at risk to that?
No. Absolutely.
I don't think you are. Are you really?
Yeah, if they're able to use that and cash it, then you would still be at risk. But again, you'd have to go through the investigative process.
I got to tell you, the ones that I receive have asterisks on the back before you're endorsing it, that it's a loan, and that it looks like Philadelphia lawyer wrote the disclosures on the back of those in your endorsed spots, and most of them will have that this is not a contract or an extension. You do need to get approved, and so if Joe the Ragman grabs it and runs, and he doesn't do it without I think there's a little bit. Certainly, I can't completely dispel what you're saying, but I think there's a greater exposure to the company writing them than there is the name that they've named on them.
Okay. Well,
and it comes back as far as the company taking it on the chin once an investigation.
Well,
if
and
they
as
were
you
able
said,
to
if
get it cashed.
you're getting your credit card and your debit card bills on a monthly basis, and of course everybody who has a computer or a smartphone can go online and check them as often as they want. And you must be looking at those, because every one of us, I'm not aware of anyone who's ever spent any time looking at their credit card bill, finding a phony baloney. I got something. It was a monthly bill of around almost $20 a month for some family fun pack thing. I have no clue how that happened, and I found it. It would have gone on in perpetuity, I suppose. And the credit card company refunded me. But you must have a little input here. Again, taking a little control of your own life shockingly results in good things.
Wait a minute, aren't I entitled to be protected by somebody?
Well, that's a shocking concept to a lot of people. That's one of the reasons that Dave Ramsey, I think, and if you have not listened to him on WKBZ 1090, I would recommend that you do. But his basic, you could boil everything he says down into one thing. Be responsible for yourself. And shockingly, wonderful things will result from that.
Used to be rugged American individualism.
You don't even need necessarily to be all that rugged. It's just get off the couch and turn off the TV and get your hand out of the Doritos for a few minutes a month.
Get off the sidelines, get in the game.
I think it's important. One of the things that you said early on, though, Greg, was to be aware and watch who's watching you.
Exactly.
I think that's incredible. But in fact, when we come back in the second segment, one of the things I want to get you to talk about is parking lot incidences, because there are people, especially ladies, that are getting their purses robbed, they're getting knocked down. Some of them are getting absconded with.
You're in
Exactly.
Norton Shores recently.
Yep, and
Yep,
so I really
absolutely.
want to dive into it's beyond did you steal $50 from me?
Exactly.
Is did you thump me in the head? Did you carjack me? Did you?
Yep.
So listen, we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, just a little bit of heads up. That's going to be a little bit of the second segment, but the Enigma report today will be back in full swing in the third segment, folks. We'll be right back.
And now we return to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And back to the host, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Brian Thomas. Listen, we're in today with Greg Stevens, who is a retail security and fraud professional. When we went to break, Greg, I was wanting to talk about, in general, folks are getting stolen. Literally, they themselves are getting stolen in the parking lot. So when you're out, we're all having a great time and we're thinking about Christmas and getting together with a family, and our mind is 1,000 miles away and we're on a mission. We got a list.
Yep.
What do you suggest? What's the process we can follow?
Well, the best way to not be a victim in those circumstances is, of course, to be completely aware of your surroundings. Unfortunately, it's more and more difficult in our society with the readily availability of mobile devices and the distractions of the holiday and everything else. That our mind isn't on what's going on around us. What we need to be doing is ensuring that we're paying attention to everything that's going on around us, and that takes practice. It's not something that comes natural to most people. It starts with having your head up and your eyes open, and not only does that help you to be aware of your surroundings, but it gives you a look of confidence and makes you less
Likely to be a victim.
less likely to be.
I wonder.
That's an interesting point, though.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, if you've got that look of "don't mess with me," that changes things, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it does.
Even if you're a small woman or a younger person.
Exactly.
Part or a big old fat gray haired guy like me. Part of the difference though goes to, along with confidence,
Yep.
walking with an air of confidence. But you can tell when somebody
Exactly.
is not in the present. They're in their iPad, they're in their iPhone,
Exactly.
they're looking at the Christmas list, they're detached from their surroundings. It's usually pretty obvious. We see that all the time, but especially during the Christmas season, because people are focused.
Yep.
And so they place themselves. But it's kind of what I'm wondering is there, because some people listening, they're driving down the road right now saying, "Hey, Greg Stevens, guys, he's just asking us to be paranoid."
No,
And I
not at
don't
all.
think it's a question of paranoid, but I do think it is just to your point, it's just being aware
Exactly.
and letting people see it. That person right there is aware. They're paying attention. They actually got their head up, so they're less likely to be accidentally run over by a car or to trip over a curb
Exactly.
or to have someone accost them.
Exactly. Yep. Your head up, eyes open, paying attention to who's around you, what's around you. As you're walking, and you are either through the mall or along the downtown area, wherever you may be, you can use reflective surfaces to use to see who may be walking behind you. Just pay attention to those sorts of things. And for women especially, I would suggest the purse with the strap where you can wear it across your body in your front. Make it less accessible for
Well,
someone
that
to
makes
grab
you
it.
that gives you that look again.
Exactly.
If you got the purse that particular way, it lets the bad guy know that that's someone who's already kind of looking for guys like me.
That person's
Exactly.
aware.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And for men, I would suggest carrying your wallet either in your inside jacket pocket or your front trouser pocket.
Yep.
Less accessible
Yep.
as well. And when you're leaving and entering a building, make sure that you're staying away from overgrown areas, and even in parking structures.
Greg, let me stop you for a second. Do you see a lot of pickpockets anymore?
There's still pickpockets.
Whenever I
absolutely.
think of pickpockets, I think was it Dickinson? I think
Right, exactly.
I
We
do.
just got back from Europe.
Yep.
Every single time we left the ship, we were on a cruise, and we stopped at a variety of locations. Every single time, we were warned very vigorously, watch out for pickpockets.
Which goes to my comment in the first segment that they've had this problem ingrained in the society for years. It's why they're out in front on these types of things. We feel pretty secure here in America.
Well, we don't necessarily have, we don't have
at
mass
least here in
transit.
West Michigan we do.
Well, we don't have mass transit. We don't have a situation where you're in a subway hanging onto a strap where there's somebody on four sides of you bumping in and out.
Right.
In New York, in any kind of big city, and of course, a lot of people are going to be traveling between now and the end of the year. We're not used to that here in small town USA.
No, we're
You
not.
get into a bigger community, you've got that big fat wallet sitting in your back. all of a sudden you've got an issue going on.
Well, even in this area,
everybody's not like you, Jim. Everyone doesn't have a big fat wallet.
Well, my wallet is only fat in the sense that it's got a lot of receipts from Walmart in it.
Yeah.
But you don't need a big, thick wallet to know that there's credit cards and debit cards and who knows what else in there.
You know, see, now, and I'm obviously not a security professional, but I see, and one of the examples you gave was where the purse is at. I see people all the time, especially during the holidays, big hustle bustle, and they're talking. They got their phone out in front of them. They got their list. And their purse is strung backwards over their shoulder.
Exactly.
And so it's likely that someone could grab that purse, and
they
would never even see the person, much less protect themselves.
Exactly.
Who stole your purse? I have no idea. What did that person look like?
Exactly.
I don't even know if it was a he or a she. I don't know who it was.
And ladies especially, be mindful of where your purse is when you're in the store. Don't walk 2 aisles away from your cart with your purse in it. Bad things happen when you do that. So just make sure that you're aware of what's going on around you. And then just one more time, or one more thing real quick, as far as when exiting and entering, when you're in parking structures especially, give yourself about 6 to 10 feet around pillars and vehicles, anywhere where anyone could conceal themselves. Just be mindful of that. You know, a lot of people that like to cut real close around the pillar, but that really puts yourself at risk.
Where would that apply? You're talking about like in a parking ramp?
Like at the mall or something.
Well,
along
where
those
somebody
lines,
might be able to hide, as you said, behind a pillar or behind a car.
Yep.
Again, being aware of your situation. And I think, you mentioned, we don't want to make people paranoid, but I think we've got to understand there has been a change in this country over the last few years.
Right.
Exactly.
And if you talk to judges, if you talk to prosecutors and police, we have, as a society, essentially decriminalized a lot of behavior that used to be criminal and may, in fact, officially be criminal. But the bad guys know there's no penalty to be paid for shoplifting.
Yep.
There's very little penalty to be paid for lifting somebody's cell phone out of their hand and running off with it, assuming you even got caught. There's very little penalty, certainly for the first few times that you got caught, for identity theft in today's America. And because of that, more folks who might not have been inclined towards criminality are saying, well, geez, the penalties aren't all that bad. I might want to give this a shot.
Listen, worse than first off, I agree with you, Jim, but worse than that, when you're dealing with petty thefts, a lot of retailers will say, you know what, I saw that person do that, but I don't want the liability of pointing it out, so I'm going to take it on the chin and move on.
And that does nothing but
it does
allow other folks to say, this is a good place to go.
Yeah, but then the person will say to their buddy, wow, you got away with that? No, you didn't get away with it, because all of society, including the person doing the wow, is paying for it. All of this theft and all of the electronics and Greg Stevens, your wages, all of this stuff is stacked atop the merchandise and the services that we're purchasing, because it's getting passed on. If you think the cost of theft is not in there, trust me, it's in there, just like ragu. It's in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we are in a situation where you are more likely to be be the victim of some of these less violent, less intrusive crimes, again, because of how the society has evolved, devolved.
You said that, and of course I didn't want to make, me, I can't stop politics. I'm reading a Jefferson quote: when we get piled upon one another in large cities, as in Europe, we shall become as corrupt as Europe. And that's one of the commonalities that we're having as we build upon ourselves in these large cities, is that you got, just like he's saying, you got 100 people living on a postage stamp. And you don't necessarily have a fair employment, and I don't mean fair politically like wealth distribution,
right?
But saying everyone's got a job when half of them have part-time jobs is not everyone has a job.
Well,
so you have a raising need factor in communities where people are piled up. That's why you have to have Uber regulation and everything else in these
I just
cities.
want to get us back onto the track here with a couple of questions that I've run into, and it's very, very concerning to me. Honey Bunch's 90-plus-year-old mother, we were visiting her not that long ago, and she had her her answering machine on. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have voicemail, doesn't have a smartphone, but she's got an answering machine and a landline. And she received one of these IRS phone calls. We've all received. Now I'm getting almost 2 or 3 a day from my 2 email accounts from some important sounding organization saying, contact us right now or you're in big trouble. But I received, in the span of a week, about 5 or 6 on my cell phone calls from somebody who sounded like they knew what they were talking about from the IRS, saying that there was an issue that I needed to contact, and they gave me a phone number to call. Well, I know now, although I didn't at the time, that that's bogus. But all of these scams are out there. It's one thing to be a relatively tech-savvy, adult, but it's another thing to have a grandmother or a mother, someone who is not tech-savvy, maybe a widow or a widower, and they're getting these phone calls. They're getting these emails, perhaps. They're getting the mail. What do we do about that?
Much I would say just help educate them and let them know if they get anything suspicious like that, to communicate with someone who's a little more tech savvy and understands these things, and help them to understand that such agencies, they don't call you, they don't send emails, they will communicate through correspondence, through the postal service. They send letters. They don't call. They don't send emails, and
but
that's
there
just the
are
most important
there
thing.
are even these letters. I've got a letter that appeared to come from the IRS.
Really?
It really looked pretty solid.
That's somebody that wants to meet the Postmaster General.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Well, you know what? But the Postmaster General isn't sitting out there when they're putting them in the mailbox.
Right.
You know, these are very clever things.
Yep.
And again, they're not aimed at people who are sitting here in this studio. They're aimed at young people. They're aimed at folks who maybe not be tech savvy. And let's face it, you say the term IRS to a lot of people, including probably everybody sitting right here in this studio, and you're going to get a little chill down your back, because we know the rules are, with the IRS, you are guilty until proven innocent. And I think it's important that we be aware not just of ourselves, but of our family members and perhaps friends who may be at risk to really making a terrible mistake.
Absolutely. And that's where you would contact them, not from the letter that you received, but you look up the organization and contact them.
Okay, so if you're kind of in the middle, you don't know, did the IRS contact me, or did this credit card company contact me?
Yep.
You can then look up on your own.
Yep.
Okay, don't take their phone number,
Don't
their
take their phone
website.
number, exactly.
You know, because some of these things, and maybe you can extrapolate a little bit. I don't know if we're coming up to a break, but you get these phone calls, and if you return it, you may be calling Bulgaria, and you might be incurring a significant bill. So maybe you want to come back and touch on that?
Absolutely, but we've got plenty of time. But listen, I get a whole bunch of cell phone calls from numbers all over, and if I don't recognize them,
Yep.
I'm fairly involved in politics, so it's not uncommon for me to get DC numbers and Lansing numbers. But if I don't recognize them before I dial it, if I'm really curious enough, I Google it first.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times you'll see scam alert, you'll see.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and it only takes me, especially on my iPhone, because I just copy it and paste it into Google, hit go, and immediately see that this is a problem number.
You're the tech savvy guy now.
Well, I don't want to call Guam, and I don't
92-year-old.
want to talk to
Exactly.
someone who wants my checking account
We want
number.
to pass this information, number one, through the show, but number two, through those we love. And this is a perfect time. I think it's a great time to have this, have you here as a guest, because we're going to be sitting with family, in many cases,
Exactly.
very, very young and very, very old family.
Exactly.
And it's an opportunity, rather than talk politics or Lions football, the two most depressing topics in the United States
They won
today.
2 games in a row
Exactly.
for the first time in forever.
So-
Stop it, Jim.
Well, they still remain. Two does not take it out of the depressing level. But instead of talking about those things, or as the President of the United States has suggested that we talk about gun control, let's talk about protecting Grandma and Grandpa and the kids.
This Sunday, I'm going to be working on gun control. I'll be out at the range in the back of my property.
Using both hands?
I do use both hands.
There
That
you go.
is to
That's
me
gun
is gun
control.
control. A lot
Absolutely.
of practice, repetition. That
There you
is gun control to me.
Absolutely.
So the bottom line is be aware. And by the way, to
Exactly.
Jim's point, I think he was touching on about very young or very old. I think it's very excited that are taken advantage of.
Oh, exactly.
And I think that's kind of the ringing thing that we're saying. So you're not aware you're looking at your iPhone or whatever, but you're all excited. This is a big season, and you may be with your sister, your brother, your mother, your husband, or your wife, and you're focused on that, and all of a sudden it turns into a tragedy.
Exactly. And you just want to avoid that happening. Just be aware. That's all. I guess that's all I can say. Just be aware of your surroundings. When you're going to a vehicle, have your keys ready, both for the entry of vehicle, the quick entry of vehicle, but also as possibly as a weapon. And just be aware of everyone that's around you and everything that's going on around you.
I wonder how many people, before they get in the vehicle, because a lot of times we're clicking the openers from a half a block away.
Check your vehicle before you get in.
I always look.
Exactly.
I got to tell you, it's not a thought process. I don't think, jeepers, I better look. I'm on automatic. I just glance into the back to see if there's, I just do.
But that's what you said. You train yourself. We're not used to doing these things. Make it so it becomes automatic. I like that.
Listen, America's changed a lot, and I think you kind of led to that a little while ago, Jim. America's changed a lot, and some of these things are just the reality. By the way, it's not to say that in the good old days we didn't have problems. We had different problems in the good old days, but there's always been that couple percent of the society that are willing to ruin it and cause
they have no desire to play by the rules of society. That they celebrate and actually prefer the criminal activity.
Yeah, some of them.
I see a lot of them. Far from me to bring up something controversial on your show. But ever since the last couple of years,
what's he trying to say, Brian Thomas? I don't understand what he's saying to me.
The last couple of years, I've seen the criminal element. They become emboldened with things after Ferguson and Baltimore and things of that nature, where they were even more bold in their activity and theft activity.
Part of that goes to the war against police, and I agree with you on that. And by the way, on that, we were talking before the show, and I want to make sure I add this caveat just because of the Ferguson reference. The theft that I'm seeing at my own store, and I do see it, which is just a mind blower to me. Anyone that walks into a gun shop and doesn't think, I wonder how many cameras are watching me right now, is fooling themselves. But what surprised me is that it's not gender bias.
Nope.
It's not race bias.
Nope.
It knows no age.
Exactly.
So I've seen people on my security cameras that are 80 and people that were 14.
Yep.
Usually it's small things, and it's like, I'm going to glance around the room real quick. I can get away with that. Well, no, you can't. I watched.
Exactly.
I mean, stop it. And so it's a little bit different than stealing from J.C. Penney's because I'm a small company.
Exactly.
And I don't necessarily think about the liability first. I say, hey, stop that. I've got no problems whatsoever. I mean, the people that know me that have been in the shop, or if they're listening right now, they're laughing. Because it's gun shop's a little bit of a different atmosphere. Talk about the old school way of doing things. The only thing we're missing is the Cracker Barrel in a chess or a checker game. But to me, these things are, all of it is the society that we're getting to. Exactly. Technology is aiding it, and we just need to be aware. If you walk away from this interview today, folks, with any one word that rings the bell, make it the word aware. Be aware, please.
Yep.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Riley?
Absolutely.
I don't think I've ever called him Mr. Riley before.
About time we started being aware of the need for respect.
Oh, my goodness. Speaking of enigmas, folks, we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to splash into the enigma of higher education. We'll be right back.
And now back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And we've come to the place that we all wonder, what does this thing really look like? What does the Enigma report look like? But we can't tell you what it looks like. We can describe it, but are we telling the truth? You'll just have to use the theater of mind. Theater of mind. Thanks to Mike Hewitt. Mike, take it away.
You know,
that good.
Before the bell rang, I was already starting to giggle, and Brian Thomas is looking at me like, you're already laughing. I haven't said nothing yet.
That's good.
His intros, I think, are actually better than the segment.
Because I have no idea what I'm going to do until I do it. So
yeah, I think that's true.
It's all off the cuff here.
And listen, here's
Those
the worst part.
Certainly helping.
I don't either. So
we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, listen, today's enigma. By the way, Greg Stevens is staying on with Jim Riley and I, and obviously Brian Thomas is here. A few days ago, I put a post on Facebook, and it's highlighted something that has truly been an enigma to me for some time. I've talked about it a little bit on the show before. We've had some educators on, But the cost of higher education, what I wrote on, and I have to read this to you so it'll make sense what my enigma is. I wrote, several presidential candidates have quipped they'd support government programs to help folks reeling from the high cost of higher education. Please stop helping. Government programs are exactly why higher education costs have escalated more than 1,000% just since 1980, during a period of time when wages have doubled. So double wages, 1,000% increase in college tuition and state contribution costs. Clearly, socialism doesn't work, and each industry our government has experimented with was driven out of the reach for the average citizen. Socialistically supported industries become unmanageable piranha when injected into a capitalist economic system. I passionately believe that. I think the evidence is on my side. That comment turned into, as you may imagine, a big old lengthy debate. One of the persons on, and I'm not going to get into names and the names of colleges, it doesn't matter, but one of the persons that was exceptionally harsh in reply called me a freeloader to start with, and what made me smile a little bit. But listen, this fella is a vice president at a state-funded university, and his income is public record. It's about $250,000 a year. And
that's one of many vice presidents in any university.
Yeah, there's a
too.
boatload of them. There's
Yeah.
a big list, and you can Google it. Whether it's University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, it doesn't matter if it receives state funding. Their payroll is public, and so that's where I got my info. In fact, at $250,000, it was about a year old, so not this past calendar year, but a couple years ago. And listen, I don't have a classism issue. If this person generates enough money for that university to warrant that income, if his or her success is that grand for their applied effort, whatever, good for you. What I have a problem with is Renegade River. I can use it as an example. This particular school has a 77% completion rate for a freshman. They're bragging about that, by the way. And then if you look at the other end of the stick, their graduation rate with a 4-year degree is 32.4%. So if you came to Renegade River and bought products from me, and I could look you in the eye with braggadocio and say, hey, just a little less than a third of our products work.
How would that work if those same people ran airlines?
Yeah, exactly.
But listen, when I dig into this a little bit further, and by the way, everybody, I want everyone to understand, I'm not ragging on higher education. I'm not so immersed with it that it's become a religion for me that I think that it has to be. I think that a person needs to look themselves in the mirror, and if that's the path they want to put themselves on, God bless them. I'm behind them. I want to make sure it's clear that I'm not taking higher education to task. I'm taking the results of state-funded higher education to task for their results. So if I look at the people, the third, just a hair less than 25% that fell out in the first year, that walked away owing roughly $10,000 in tuition for something that doesn't amount to anything. It didn't. You don't go to an employer and say, "Wow, am I on fire here? I got 2 semesters under my belt." It doesn't. There's not a sellable. But you owe $10,000 on average, but you have nothing to present to a potential employer. Or if I look at the end of it and say almost 70% didn't end up with a degree, and they walked away in many cases with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And this person calls me a freeloader because I don't want my state funds to pay for it. I'm aghast by that. To me, it's an enigma. Here's the way the way, and I can't quote it, but you can folks, if you're curious to want to validate or prove me wrong, get on Google and you can look up the state's constitution. The state of Michigan's constitution demands that the state fund public higher education. Okay, but the state constitution does not allow for our state legislators to dictate or direct how the curriculums will go. So there you are with your 4-year degree and an average of $40,000 in debt, which in my world is a mortgage. And you've likely got, just by percentages, you've likely gotten yourself a really great social worker degree, which will give you an income to begin with, about half of what your debt is. And by the way, if you ever look at how they do the college tuition debts, It's like putting $40,000 on your charge card. It is outrageous insulting. You'll never pay it. You've got people running around making $25,000 and $30,000 a year trying to figure out how in the heck they're going to pay for a $500 a month college tuition bill. And this guy making $250,000 calls me a freeloader because I resent that. Folks, that's an enigma to me that we are so far apart. And listen, I'm not saying this guy's good or bad. We're just so politically far apart that I think that 32.4% is not a successful success rate. Nothing that I want my state dollars to go to. No. I think we talk about fraud. I think it's fraud. I really do.
I would agree.
If you're a young, excited 18-year-old or 17-year-old and you've done okay at school, public education for your K through 12, and you got this big future planned, and you go and you sit down with a counselor, and by the way, I've been through this process with my daughters. You want to talk about the dog and pony show. Oh, my goodness, these guys, it's a dog and pony show. It really is the introduction. Bring your parents. And they bell ring, and the only thing they're missing is the 3-ring circus. And they got that. It's a big sales pitch, and it gets everyone ginned up. But what ought to happen, in my view, you want to be a caseworker? Good. We need caseworkers. Let's sit down and look at the income. Let's look down at the graph of increase that you'll have, and look at the debt you'll be burdened with. And does this make sense to you? If it does, if you're okay with it, good. But folks, I passionately believe they're not being honest with these young people and their parents. I really believe that. And we've suddenly got this element in our society that says you're nothing if you don't go to college. And yet we know that only 25% of the high school graduates go to college.
Okay, let's address your enigma, because I think I've got a very simple answer for you.
All right. Be aware.
The enigma
Be aware, exactly.
is, why is this happening? And I can tell you, I think, it very quickly. In the old days, when you went to college, you went to junior college or whatever, you would either save up the money, as I did, or you would combination save up the money and get a loan. And you would get that loan from a bank. And the bank, before they were going to give you a loan, would look at your ability to ultimately pay it back. They would perhaps say, if you were going to get a 4-year degree in women's studies, they would say, well, perhaps we're not going to loan you the money because there are very, very few jobs available for people in women's studies. Let's say you wanted to become a marine biologist
Jim
because
Riley,
you happened to see a fishing show.
Are you talking about market-driven solutions?
Exactly.
Oh, Jim Riley.
Now,
do you know how many people's head just exploded?
Well, let's. My point isn't going to take very long. The reality is that you would go to the bank, and the bank would make decisions based on the market.
Yep,
now, when President Obama, now this is happening before because of federally guaranteed
President
loans.
Carter and everyone in between, by the way.
But President Obama took over almost the entire student loan business. It's very rare that anyone would even think about going to a bank to get a student loan, because the government gives you, without any question, without any vetting at all, young people thousands upon thousands of dollars in loans, not just for tuition, but for books, but for, in some cases, travel. In some cases, the federal government will loan you day-to-day spending money. And therein lies the issue. If, in fact, you took the federal government out, we don't need to create a new bureaucracy. We don't need to spend a penny more. Get the federal government out of loaning money to young people for loans. Give scholarships based on perhaps scholarship, perhaps on some other reasons. But when it comes to loans, make a bank have to make the decision whether or not you can pay it back. It's as simple as that.
I don't entirely disagree with you. I have to tell you, the more government has gotten involved, and you can do this. You can do this research. It's really, really easy. It takes you about 15 minutes on Google. If you go back to the 1940s and 50s and even into the first half of the 60s, when government was absolutely not involved, it wasn't the equivalent. We can't say that, well, it's just a ratio based on incomes, because it wasn't. It was, you went to college and you were burdened for 2 or 3 years during or after. A lot of people paid for college working at Pizza Hut or pizza shops while they were attending.
That's what I did.
That's what most people did. And now you can't pay for $40,000 for your nonsensical degree where only 25% of the curriculum is aimed at what you're trying to be when you grow up. You can't pay for that working at the local restaurant. You just can't. It's gotten to the point where it was outrageous.
Most people don't believe they're going to be forced to pay it back. You have the President of the United States today, and you have the two leading candidates for the presidential nomination of the Democrat Party, both today, saying, we believe that people students with loan debt should be forgiven.
Listen, I've been saying...
So most people, one of the reasons people are taking this debt is they don't expect that they're going to have to pay it back.
I've been saying on this show, in fact, we did an episode in the first year about kind of exactly what you were just saying. I believed then and believe now that the sole goal of driving this cost out of the average person's reach was designed to make a 4-year degree become part of the K through 12, so now be K through 16. I really believe that is the end result, and nobody will care if someone's making $250,000 and not contributing.
Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have said that exact thing.
Well, to me, if you want proof that the government is screwing up everything, go to your doctor, and you'll get a dozen bills from your one trip to your doctor that you can't afford to pay for because now that health is free. To me, it's an insane thing. But folks, find us at Talk Mike Hewitt on Twitter. Find us at /The Mike Hewitt Show. Or like us on Facebook. Please do take a look. Let us know what things you'd like us to talk about. I'd be very curious to get some feedback on that. In the meantime, Greg Stevens, thank you very, very much. And Mr. Jim Riley, thank you.
Hey, great show. Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Brian Thomas, happy Thanksgiving, and thank you. Folks, we'll see you next Wednesday. Happy Thanksgiving. Please be safe.